Hello and welcome to this evening's edition of Tisky Sal. My name's Bastani. Thank you very much for joining us. We have the immense pleasure this evening of being joined by Zarah Sultana. How you doing, Zarah?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Our pleasure. What's your Twitter handle?
It's at Zarah Sultana.
And it's Zarah with an H.
With a H, yeah. It's Zarah like the shop with a H. And Sultana like dried raisins, I guess.
And you're the newest MP for Coventry South.
I am, proudly.
And you're from Coventry?
I'm originally from Birmingham, but I've got family in Coventry. My dad used to work in Coventry, so there are links to Coventry.
What did your dad do?
He's an accountant, so I've got a love of spreadsheets that comes from my dad.
We are going to be talking about basically Zarah's first 3 months in Parliament, first 2.5 months in Parliament, a bunch of things. But I guess, how have you been? This has obviously been a very tumultuous, intense couple of months for you, hasn't it?
Yeah, I got selected on my birthday. I turned 26, and as soon as I got selected as the parliamentary candidate for Coventry South, the election campaign begun the very next day. Very fast-paced, had comrades who travelled from Austria, Sweden, and across the country, as well as the West Midlands and Coventry to help. And Christmas, after the general election, couldn't have come at a better time. Definitely needed that rest and to be able to process everything.
You had a big year because you did the European elections as well, didn't you, in May?
Yeah.
That must have been a really intense year for you, a lot of work.
The May election was 3 weeks, so it was a very fast-paced, short election, and I was placed 5th in the West Midlands regional list, and it gave me an opportunity to really exert my politics. I was really concerned about the direction of the European MEP elections, especially given the referendum result. And for me, it was really important to show pro-migrant solidarity and have that anti-racist politics, just given the direction of the Leave campaign, which was unashamedly racist in every single way. So it was a really exciting campaign, and I'm really glad I did it.
And what date's your birthday?
Halloween, 31st of October.
So all the way from Halloween to December 12th, it was just like most intense 6 weeks of your life, basically.
Yes.
What was the highlight?
Winning, but it was bittersweet at the same time. On election night, I saw the exit poll.
Were you expecting it?
I thought we would at least get a hung parliament. I thought I was filled with absolute hope. I thought we had an excellent manifesto. I was really excited, especially in Coventry South. We had huge canvassing sessions. I saw the exit poll and my heart sunk. I also thought I had lost the seat as well. So winning, but coupled with seeing Dennis Skinner, Laura Pidcock lose their seats, I just knew that I would be entering a parliament that would be incredibly difficult. Another 5 years of Tories, another 5 years of cuts, another 5 years of absolute carnage being wreaked on our communities. And the fact that Jeremy wouldn't be going into Downing Street and we wouldn't be in power. It was difficult.
So you're expecting a hung parliament, and you thought maybe there'd be every chance for Labour, not every chance, but a decent chance for Labour government.
I thought that would be the bare minimum. I'm an optimist. I'm a Liverpool fan. I have to be an optimist.
Really? I mean, Liverpool are doing quite well.
I mean, we haven't been doing well for the majority of my life.
30 years since you last won a title.
So, as a football fan, optimism has to be in the DNA. So I was wholeheartedly optimistic about the election result, but unfortunately it didn't go to plan.
What's it like being in Parliament?
Incredibly strange. I am familiar with the parliamentary estate and the building. I studied international relations at university and politics at A-level. So politics isn't alien to me in that sense, if we look at it purely from a knowledge-based perspective. But in Parliament, someone who is working class, someone who is a woman, someone who is a person of colour, Parliament wasn't built for people like me, and there are reminders. And one statistic that I find absolutely shocking, but it sums it up, is the fact that there are more horses in portraits on the parliamentary estate than women. And that just shows the fact that it was built for a certain type of person that doesn't look or sound like me.
Are there any brown and black women on portraits?
I don't believe there are any. And if they are, they're probably in the background somewhere. But I haven't spotted any at all. So
do you buy the argument that's sort of been made by Bennites for a very long time, which is Parliament is intentionally set up to constantly remind you that you're a parliamentarian first, a socialist second, which is to say you're there to represent the general interests of the British establishment rather than the interests of working people.
I agree with that critique. And you see the pressures of parliamentarianism right from the get-go. As a new MP, we are told that our maiden speeches shouldn't be political. And you see that,
the convention,
they shouldn't be political. The convention is that maiden speeches, your very first speech in the chamber, shouldn't be political. And even other traditions and conventions referring to MPs, including Tory MPs, as honourable members, all of those things reflect this pressure to conform and to not challenge the status quo. And for me, I believe it's absolutely important to reflect the conflict that is happening within society. We have seen a decade of Tory cuts. We've seen 40 years of deindustrialization. We have seen our communities really suffer. People are going to food banks in the 6th richest economy in the world, and that's become a norm. I think it's absolutely outrageous, and I think it's important for MPs to be political in every sense. You know, that's the job that they have. They have constituents to serve. And for me, I've been very explicit in the fact that I am proudly working class and I'm here to serve my constituents and working class people. And that means fighting back against anything that harms their interests.
On that note, we're going to watch Zarah's maiden speech in the House of Commons in January, was it, or December?
It feels like a long time ago, but yeah, January.
January.
We have seen Australia burn and Indonesia drown. We have seen our Earth teeter on the brink of ruin. We have heard this warning of scientists, and we know where the blame lies. It's with the 100 companies that are responsible for 70% of global pollution. It's with the billionaires who got rich polluting our rivers and pumping out carbon. It's with an economic system that puts the profits of the rich above the needs of the people. So make no mistake about it. The climate crisis is a capitalist crisis, and the climate struggle is a class struggle across borders. Whether you're in Coventry or Canberra, Doncaster or Delhi, if you're working class, you'll suffer the worst effects of floods, fires, droughts, and devastation, while the rich will build ever higher walls to protect themselves. That's what's coming. That's what's coming unless we take bold action. It's what will happen unless we unite working people across borders to say our lives are more important than anyone's profits. It's what will happen unless we put power in the hands of the working class to put people and planet first. This is the urgent call of our times, an international Green New Deal to transition from disaster capitalism to a new society created on the principles of equality, freedom, and justice. Building green industries, providing good unionised jobs, democratising our economy, and eradicating poverty. That new society has an old name. It's a name that inspired past generations in the fight against mass unemployment, war, and fascism. It's the name they gave to a decent, livable, healthy future on this planet. That name is socialism.
That's a great speech. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What was the response to it from fellow parliamentarians? Obviously on Twitter and Facebook, it goes down very well with the Labour membership, with Labour voters. Oh, this is promising, this is new. But with the people around you, what was the sense you got as you said those words? So across the chamber, I could see Tory MPs who were raising their voices while I was delivering the speech. They were gesticulating and making sounds to distract me and to essentially make me uncomfortable. So that's what happened in the chamber. Afterwards, I've been told that I'm a firebrand, and that was a bit controversial. By MPs on the Labour side included. Right. Yeah, so... But in the same vein, I've had some MPs who have been very happy and very proud of that speech. John McDonnell was the person who gave me the advice to not shy away from the politics, and he actually advised me to do it as soon as possible during the Queen's speech. The reason being is that you have to do your maiden speech to be able to do any other speeches. You can intervene and make those small interventions during a debate, but you can't make an actual speech in Parliament until you've done your maiden speech. Right. And I mean, everything you said is quite common sense.
Yeah.
There's a climate crisis. We need to respond politically. The only way that can really happen is actually from working people of all backgrounds coming together. I mean, how does that? Why would that make you a firebrand? Do you think saying those words?
I think the fact that I was explicitly using class-based politics, that was something that was highlighted, but it was actually the 40 years of Thatcherism that got me mentioned in opinion pieces by a lot of centrist commentators that still are publishing articles every week on that, even though Lisa Nandy has also referred to 40 years of neoliberalism or Thatcherism, but they seem to be focused on me for some reason.
Well, there's a quote from Peter Mandelson in 2002 where he says, Thatcherism won. We're all Thatcherites, and it's repeatedly said by precisely these people. But then when you rehearse their own words back to them.
Tony Blair in 2013 literally said that he saw his job as building on some of the things Thatcher did, not reversing them. And when we look at the economic settlement, we see that nothing's really changed. We're still a heavily finance-based economy. We look at the power the City of London has. We look at the fact that none of the anti-trade union legislation have been reversed in that time. While there were great things achieved under New Labour, like Sure Start, like the national minimum wage, which
was John Smith, but it wasn't Tony Blair. People forget that.
Fair enough. But these things that, the Open University, things that we should be proud of, but fundamentally, we didn't seek to change the neoliberal consensus, which is what Jeremy's manifesto wanted to do.
Do you think the Tories are serious about climate change? Do you
Absolutely not.
Do you think it's just
Absolutely not.
Do you think it's just like a thing? People think that, we have to do something about it, but then they just sort of...
It's hard to not say you are trying to do something about it when half the country is flooding. And the fact that young people, school children, have been striking on Fridays, raising everyone's attention to this. I think the fact that they had their manifesto written by fossil fuel lobbyists and fossil fuel execs tells you how much they really care about it. The UK-Africa summit, which only took place a couple of weeks ago.
Didn't even know that happened.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. Well, these things happen, behind closed doors. Around £2 billion of trade deals were agreed upon, and they're still inherently based in fossil fuels. So there's going to be, the Tories talk the talk, and unfortunately they will never walk the walk, because their interests are to serve the 1%, is to serve the fossil fuel billionaires. And the fact that they talk about the 2050 target to achieve net zero, which is a death sentence to millions of people in the global south, it's based on inaccurate science. It's completely out of date. And actually, they're 49 years off even achieving that. We're set to achieve that in 2099 based on current trends.
We're going to talk about lobbying. We're going to talk about Heathrow. We're going to talk about Google. But before we do, you're watching Tysky Sour on Novara Media. If you like what you're watching, share this video on the hashtag Tysky Sour. The link is in the description. So, like I say, share away. Also, any questions, put them at the end, either put them on the hashtag or in the comments with the rocket emoji. Much appreciated. And if I just look right now, okay, I've got about 800 people watching, but only 184 likes. Smash the like button. It doesn't cost you anything. Just do me a favor, hit that thumb icon you can see. Much appreciated. Aside from what you said about neoliberalism and New Labour sort of continuing Thatcherism rather than breaking with it, I suppose what people may be most familiar with is how keen you've been to reveal the sort of quotidian, almost mundane level of lobbying that's done in the Houses of Parliament. It's like switching on the lights. It's just there constantly in the background. Has that surprised you, the extent to which that happens?
It has. Receiving things in the post, walking through Parliament through this particular corridor, you see it all around you. When I first received the gifts, I was wholeheartedly surprised, because it's so normal that people don't actually question it. People don't really challenge it. And once you get past the gifts and the receptions, there are the meals that big business pay for, and then there's also the trips abroad, including trips by foreign governments. So one of the things that I highlighted was that while the UK was sending arms to Saudi Arabia, who were involved in bombing Yemen, essentially, we had the former Tory chairman invited to Saudi Arabia by the Saudi government and their foreign ministry. So all of these things are inextricably tied. Even with the Tory party's donors, if you look at them, 1/3 of UK billionaires fund the Tory party, and rich people don't give their money away just because they want to, out of the generosity or the goodness of their hearts. They want something in return. And I believe they're getting an excellent investment. We've seen this Tory government and consecutive Tory governments on course to give up to £100 billion in tax cuts and corporate giveaways. So there's a vested interest, and this is how the 1% are working together.
Do you think that these gifts, these goodies, should be scrapped, banned? Do you think that just
Absolutely. I think
because it's like you don't get anything for nothing, right? I mean, that's just common sense to most people, and yet it seems to be business as usual at Westminster.
Anything an average working class person can't do, I don't think big business should be able to do. They shouldn't be able to exert a different amount or a different degree of influence over parliamentarians. I think everyone is able to email their MP, set up meetings with their MPs, but these gifts don't come just it's just not a box of tea bags. With Heathrow, we saw an explicit letter which said, we hope you support our third runway. So they're asking for something in return, and it's subtle, it's a drip feed. First you'll get a gift, then you might get invited to a meeting. I haven't been invited to any meetings at all, but it's part of this culture where this just goes unchallenged, and it feeds into our political system, and it's highly undemocratic and should be called out.
I mean, critical part of New Labour as well, you've got people like John Woodcock, who had very close relationships to BAE Systems, the most sort of widely recognised one, Angela Smith, and private water interests. Do you think that Labour MPs should have absolutely no relationship whatsoever to private vested interests whilst they're MPs?
I think if you're an MP, your job is to serve your constituents, and you serve them, not big business.
Because people say no second jobs, but I think that proximity of lobbying in MPs is also another one that we should probably think about quite clearly. We're going to cut to a video now, if that's all right, folks, of Zarah talking on the behalf of Double Down News. They're fantastic. Go follow them on Facebook and Twitter if you can. She's doing an unboxing with some of these gifts from Heathrow, from Google. So let's watch that now.
So in this box that we received from Google and YouTube, same company really, we have some gifts. So we have some tea bags, lots of tea bags, and it's good for the environment, sure, but the packaging it came in, this is some quality stuff, not very good for the environment. This letter could have been sent as an email. They really didn't need to laminate it and send it through, but they did. My message to Google is, thank you for the gifts, but I would rather you paid your tax. Okay, we're just gonna throw those away. Do you know those shows where they just go shh and they disappear? Our next gift box is from an organisation most of us are familiar with, Heathrow. Open this. Right. We have quite the array of stuff. It looks like a food hamper. We have some crisps that I can't eat because it's port. Should we do that again? We have some crisps that I can't eat because of the port. We've got some biscuits. We've got some tea bags, a pen, some fiery chili jam, which I never knew was a thing, but that's a thing. This is a portable charger. My message to Heathrow is, thanks for the food, but it's not going to buy me out, because my priority in Parliament is working on the climate emergency. I want to work on an international Green New Deal, working with people across borders, because we know that our enemy travels by private jet, not migrant dinghy. And a third runway would mean that the UK will not achieve its climate objectives. So thanks, but no thanks.
It's a great framing about how we need to look out for migrants rather than for big business. Again, why do you think such a clear, ethically driven message? I mean, that's I think nobody would dispute that that's what politicians should do, act in the public interest. Why has that got so many people angry?
A lot of people think that lobbying and corporate lobbying is an issue in the US and not really the case here. We talk about Bernie Sanders and other Democrats and politicians refusing to have corporate PACs. We're very familiar with the way big business operates in the US, and I don't think we've had the same conversation in the UK. So a lot of people are angry because it shows that the system of democracy that they value and respect is actually being compromised by big business, and how that is compromised also by their parliamentarians, and it's important to root it out.
So you talked about the pork crisps.
Yes.
So you're a Muslim.
Yes.
And whether it's pork or pork, obviously you couldn't.
Both off the menu.
What's it like being a Muslim in the House of Parliament as an MP? How do you find it? Obviously, you've had other jobs and so on. How do you find your faith cared for in a parliamentary setting?
I think the biggest thing has been food. I'm a big foodie. I really love food. And in Parliament, we have 9 cafeterias and not a single one provides halal or kosher food, which I found quite shocking, given the fact that it's in London. You can't really avoid halal in London. It's, pretty much every restaurant.
There's nowhere in halal you can get. Nowhere in Parliament you can get halal.
No. So I want to become vegan at some point, but Parliament has made me a vegan.
Wow. So you could go to a high street in South London where you've only got a chicken shop, a betting shop, and you can still find halal food, but you can't get it in Parliament.
And this is a workplace for people of all faiths and none. There are loads of people whose dietary requirements are halal and kosher, and they would find Parliament inaccessible. And I think in 2020, we shouldn't be having this conversation, but we are. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done on that front.
Any other aspects of the parliamentary estate that's kind of lacking when it comes to...
There's a few. I think also people who observe, regardless of which faith it is, the fact that we have one multi-faith prayer room, which isn't in the best location, people would have to walk quite far. I think there needs to be a conversation around space and how we're using space, and is it accommodating for everyone's needs, whether it's, there's a nursery on Parliament, which is excellent for people who have children. There's a gym for people as well, which is excellent as well in terms of what mental health and well-being and just general fitness. But I think when it comes to accommodating for faith, it could do better.
And so maybe you don't want to say because I don't know, security concerns. You said there's just one room. Where is it in terms of the parliamentary estate?
No, it's public. I believe it's public. It's in Westminster Hall.
Right.
So it's
not even in the House of Parliament?
No, it's not. So it's accessible by walking down the set of stairs. If anyone's been on the parliamentary estate and if they've been to Westminster Hall, you walk down a set of stairs. You might want to go to the cafe or the gift shop, and there's a room there that they can use. But it's not purpose built. It's really, the fact that a lot of people don't even know that it exists tells you a lot. So I think we need to do better. We have to do better.
That's not what you'd expect from a modern country, is it really? How did you first get politicized?
I think back to the Iraq War. I remember millions of people marching in London.
So you would have been how old? 10, 11?
I think, around. I can't think of the maths right now. Work it out, but I was very young, and I remember millions of people marching. Saw the placards, and we went to war, and it stayed with me because I then reflect on millions and, hundreds of thousands of young people marching in London across the country against tuition fees, yet we still treble them. But just going back to Iraq, for me, that brought in or ushered in the war on terror. And what that felt for me growing up was surveillance cameras in my hometown. There's this particular incident where security cameras under the guise of traffic calming measures were placed in a majority Muslim area of Birmingham. And when they were found out to be essentially spying on the community, they were removed. But I remember that vividly. I remember going to university and being afraid to exert my opinions on foreign affairs.
Which university
I went to the University of Birmingham. I did international relations and economics. But talking about foreign policy, talking about Al-Qaeda and ISIS, which will naturally come up in conversations in international relations, I felt myself stifled, my speech stifled by Prevent, which disproportionately targets Muslims and people of color. So all of these things really shaped me. And then I was in the intake in 2012. I had to pay £9,000 tuition fees. So going from, the war on terror and foreign policy to austerity and tuition fees, all of these things really shaped my politics.
So you got a really bum deal, basically.
Yeah, we got screwed essentially. And when I went to university, one of the first things I did was get involved with the free education movement or a group on campus, along with Palestine Solidarity. And through the National Union of Students, I was able to really build my understanding of anti-racism, working on various campaigns with liberation groups as well. And then Jeremy became leader of the Labour Party. I'd been a Labour Party member ever since I was 17, so for many, many years. But with Jeremy's leadership and spaces like Young Labour opening up, me and many others finally found the Labour Party as a space that was welcoming and allowed us to get involved.
You had a great group up in Birmingham, if I remember correctly. Some very good campaigners. Yes. So you say that you felt stifled as a Muslim to talk about foreign policy issues. There's a great book, by the way, on precisely this. I just reread it. Aaron Gudnani, The Muslims Are Coming, was first published in 2014. Maybe Fox can get up a picture of it. Very naughty of me to say it. Brilliant book, because it's just he collects so much data.
Yeah.
He's not just offering like an analytical overview of this stuff. It's also just tons of case studies from the US, from the UK, precisely this stuff. So how did you respond to that? Because often Muslims have to sort of couch their politics within the politics of. It's difficult to be politically radical, while also having to constantly disavow a different. There's nothing wrong with radicalism. Radical comes from the word, the idea to get to the root of something, to get to the fundamentals of something. But it's always difficult for somebody in an environment where you're not meant to be able to break with the status quo to then say, actually, I have a structural critique of British foreign policy or of how we run our economy. How old were you, or what set of events was it? You were saying it was around 2010, I guess.
Yeah.
When you realised you could kind of break with that. You could stick your neck above the sort of.
I have 3 sisters, so in my household, you always have to fight your way to get heard. So sticking my head above the parapet is something not too unfamiliar. But at university and organising with amazing campaigners across the country and building, we had the Students Not Suspects tour. We worked with Black Lives Matter and did a campaign against deaths in police custody. All of these things were really, really important in my political journey, I would say. And that's what's allowed me to speak, I guess, in Parliament, knowing that I come from a movement and I come from a background and a community and a history of speaking up.
Yeah, I think we'll move on in a second to class stuff, not just necessarily faith, but what all the great faiths sort of share in common is charity, solidarity, looking out for your fellow human beings. And that's obviously political. Yeah. That's a set of ethical values which you then want to if you're trying to transplant them into a social setting, that's a progressive politics. And I feel like a lot of, particularly younger Muslims, but it applies to every faith, younger Muslims can't necessarily express those as political values as well as ethical ones.
I agree. And I think for me, I think back to what my faith mandates of me or calls me to do. So I think back to the hadith, which is the saying of the Prophet Muhammad, which says the greatest struggle is speaking the word of truth to an oppressor. And you can interpret that in many different ways. And then there's another saying, which is basically, if you see something that's wrong, then it is upon you to correct it. And that's by action. If you can't do it by action, then you do it through speaking up. If you can't do it through speaking up, then you do it by disapproving with it. And if you can't do that, then in your heart, have it within your heart, at least, keep that morality or sense of morality or injustice, fighting against injustice in your heart. So that's what compels me. It's that I have to, because it's the right thing to do, and actually it's a bit obligatory upon me to do it. Yeah.
As I get older, I'm sort of getting fascinated by religion. I think what crystallized a lot of it for me was reading Paul Mason's Clear Bright Future, and he talks about the impact of his name's a bit of a bottom at the moment in Novara Media. But it's a good book. It's not as good as Post-Capitalism, but it's a good book. And basically, what neoliberalism has done, he talks about how National Socialism, according to Hannah Arendt, doesn't come out from the collapse of, isn't a sort of an outgrowth of the German personality. It's ridiculous, but rather the collapse of the German personality, the national character, under the conditions of the 1930s. So you have this sort of insurgent Prussian nationalism, militarism, etc. And he says, what happens if we go through a similar process in the next, we're 10 years into it, right? A similar process of economic stagnation, if that leads therefore to a cultural malaise, what does the neoliberal self look like in an era of no growth, of climate systems breakdown? And actually, I think that neoliberal self, it could get quite ugly because it hasn't got an ethical core. The whole point of neoliberalism is You know, oh, we want to build a library in Sheffield. Why? Will it make money? People don't say what books are going to go into it, how many kids are going to learn to read there. And so these questions of morality and ethics, I think, are hugely important, although the left often doesn't talk about them. Obviously, there's a secular humanist tradition as well, very important one. Is the Tory party Islamophobic?
Yes. And it comes from the top down. You see a prime minister that has made racist remarks against people from all backgrounds, whether you're from the black community, whether you're LGBT, when Boris Johnson remarked that Muslim women who wear the veil are bank robbers and letterboxes, we saw a 365% increase in hate crimes, direct anti-Muslim hate crimes. And even today, a report published showed that many Tory councillors, but also rank and file members, have been found to have made explicitly anti-Muslim remarks, including a Tory councillor who said Muslims shouldn't have human rights because of their animal-like behaviour. So you have a Tory councillor.
Right.
I don't know the name, but I don't think the name was published, but it just shows you that there is a culture within the Conservative Party where they have even, reluctantly recently said that they're going to have a review into Islamophobia and all forms of discrimination. We don't know when that's going to be published. We don't know who they're actually talking to, because they actually don't talk to a great number of Muslim community organizations or the Muslim community. So for me, looking at the Conservative Party right now and the policies where they are more than willing to deport black and brown Britons who have lived their entire lives in the UK, they are complicit in the racist rhetoric that has become normalised. After the general election, we saw a huge influx of Britain First members who felt like the Conservative Party...
Well, Tommy Robinson, right?
Exactly. They felt like this was their new political home. So it's incredibly scary, but needs to be called out.
Did the same apply to, was New Labour Islamophobic? I mean, after all, they sort of oversaw the introduction of all these. I mean, maybe you shouldn't answer that. The defence would be that, well, New Labour was Islamophobic. The British state with Prevent is Islamophobic. So what's so special about the Tories and their Islamophobia?
The fact that they're in government and the fact that they don't want to really engage in the conversation. They are not willing to really look at their processes. They're not willing to really challenge structural Islamophobia. For them, it's just a few comments. We're going to have disciplinary processes. Whereas on the left, when it comes to conversations around racism, we are talking about educating. We are talking about structurally getting rid of racism, which is not something that the Conservatives or people on the right would be willing to do.
Next question. How do we get rid of racism in Britain?
I think first, it's really important to not concede or accept some of the racist myths that people perpetuate, especially around migration. I think it's really important to have pro-migrant, anti-racist politics. And secondly, I think we need to be aware and know that all of our oppressions are linked, and that we can only really defeat racism when we come together, in the sense that working class people all suffer from, shoddy landlords or poor housing, poor transport and infrastructure. The fact that austerity has destroyed our communities, that doesn't discriminate against any of us. And I think it's about coming together. I think Bernie Sanders' beautiful coalition in the US shows how you can have people from all racial backgrounds, all faith backgrounds, who are aware that the injustice that they face comes from an economic system, and that they all have a stake in defeating it. And that's how we can defeat racism.
On that note, so class and race intimately tied up. Let's go to, I think this is the final video, perhaps. This is a separate speech, right? This is your speech where you had your student debt.
Yes.
And you're talking about tuition fees. So let's see Zarah again in the House of Commons.
In 2010, like thousands of other young people, I argued against the tripling of tuition fees. But the government ignored us, and now I currently have around £50,000 of student debt. Here is my latest student loan statement. As it says, In the last year alone, the interest added was £2,022.65. So I asked the Secretary of State, can he look me in the eye and tell me that it is fair that working class kids who want an education are forced to take on this colossal debt while his government is led by a man who went from the playing fields of Eton to a free education at Oxford.
It's kind of cut off there at the end. That wasn't us. That's because the speaker sort of stopped you from finishing your sentence, didn't he?
I carried on. I did finish the line where I said about Boris Johnson having a free education, moving from the playing fields of Eton to Oxford. So I got the point across.
Do you think, I mean, to any rational person, that seems utterly ridiculous that sort of working class person today, you're in like 40,000 odd debt, you said.
50.
50, sorry.
Yeah, it's growing by 2K every year, so I'm probably just over 50 now. Yeah.
Okay, so you get, was it, how much did you say in that video? I thought it was
around nearly £50,000.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, to a normal person, that just seems absurd.
Yeah.
That somebody, you said your dad was an accountant or something?
Yeah.
What did your mum do?
My mum is, she doesn't work,
No.
as in a homemaker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then their kid has to pay £50,000 to get an education, whereas Boris Johnson paid nothing. And yet again, it's one of those things which Tory MPs just seem quite comfortable with. They think it's normal. And in fact, one of the responses was that you're sort of mobilising the politics of class warfare.
Yes.
How do you feel about that?
The Tories seem to get angry at a lot of things that I think are simple facts, essentially. When they accuse me of class warfare, I think at least there's an acknowledgement that I'm using class-based politics in the chamber, which is really important because it's the working class and their interests that I'm trying to advance in Parliament. Recently, I did an interview for BBC West Midlands and just mentioning the fact that the new Tory cabinet has 65% of people who have been to private school, that the new Chancellor is an investment banker who went to Oxford. All of these things, which are just fact, really riled him up. He was really angry next to me. And I think it's because they are just uncomfortable with dealing with class and the acknowledgement of the situation working class people face due to them.
I mean, Sajid Javid's was the predecessor of the present Chancellor. And he, of course, was... Sajid Javid, I mean, this is crazy. He was one of the most senior people selling CDOs, collateralized debt obligations.
At Deutsche Bank.
For Deutsche, yeah, before the global financial crisis. I think now the new Chancellor, I think he was formerly at Goldman Sachs.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess there's the answer as to why they get angry with you talking about class. We're going to take questions very shortly, in about 6-7 minutes. Who do you want to be the next Labour Party leader?
Rebecca Long-Bailey. For me, she has to be the next leader. She helped and led on the Green New Deal, which was so popular in Coventry South, but across the country. And for me, she is the person that can continue that socialist politics that Jeremy brought to the leadership and to our party. And that's why I think it's really important that we support her. And it's about time we had a woman leader of the party.
Do you think that those politics, the Green New Deal, do you think that could still be reflected in whoever leads the party? Do you think that's something that, or will that have to be struggled for? Or
I think it's a fight that we'll have to keep on fighting. The politics of the climate emergency, along with looking at the fact that we need to create green, sustainable jobs, that we need to be really investing in our communities, especially post-industrial towns and cities that have seen the loss of manufacturing jobs, and how this would really bring back life to those communities. I think Rebecca is the best placed person to do it. She knows the green industrial revolution or the Green New Deal like the back of her hand, and she'd be the best person to make sure that we deliver upon it.
And deputy leader, who would you like to see there?
Richard Bergen. He is the candidate that is fighting for members' democracy. He is strongly, internationalist and anti-racist in his politics. And I think he would really make sure that the party works for members.
What did you say before the show? You used the portmanteau.
Yeah, I said surgeon because there's a huge surge. Richard Bergen and the surgeon.
There was a survation poll, wasn't there, that showed him, I mean, he made up a lot of ground on. I mean, Angela Rayner was still 10 points ahead. What was interesting about that poll, actually, we can maybe get it up, we maybe can't, was Rosina Allen Khan was like 4th or 5th, but there is actually a path for her to winning. which I know it sounds odd, but if people look at this, there is actually a path there to winning. Anyway, so I know people like to vote tactically and only do 1 or 2 preferences for deputy leader. Probably don't do that. You should probably put like 3. I mean, I'm going to do 3.
As long as Richard's first.
I'm going to do 3, but that's all I'm saying. US president. Who would you like to see as the next US president?
Bernie Sanders. I am so excited by Bernie. I can't help but just smile and light up when I just talk about him. And I would really like to do a Bernie journey. So if anyone can help arrange that, I am so up for it.
What would a Bernie journey consist of?
It means traveling to the US to canvass for Bernie and just be part of that amazing campaign.
I think, well, I probably shouldn't say this, but I know that Gary wants to go to America for a few months. Wants all expenses
I can't
paid.
do a few months. I can do a few days a week, a few weeks.
I think Ash as well. So yeah, maybe you can do something else. That'd be interesting. Let's do quick fire and then we'll go to questions.
Okay.
So put the questions in the comments, rocket emoji, or on the hashtag TiskySar. Quick fire. Are you one of the following? Which one? West Midlands, English, or British?
West Midlands.
Aston Villa or Birmingham?
Liverpool. You're a Man United fan, innit?
You have to choose. Yeah, but I come from Bournemouth. I used to go watch Bournemouth when they were in the old, now it's called League One. It was called the second division then. I used to go to watch Bournemouth when Eddie Howe was a centre-back and I was the manager. That's how I know I'm old. Jeremy Corbyn or John McDonnell?
Both. You can't make me choose.
If you had to, though.
I can't. I refuse.
That actually sounds sincere when you say that. Full English or continental breakfast?
Full English. Halal.
So how does that work?
So you can have vegetarian sausages, right? You can make it work. Okay, a vegetarian full English.
Well, but I guess like Turkish breakfast, they kind of like, Turkish sucuk.
Oh, you can have Turkish.
Oh my God.
Turkey
So
bacon.
tasty. Yeah,
it works.
It works. Okay. Sucuk, Turkish sausage, best sausage. Even though I'm a vegetarian now. Favorite Tory?
None.
Is there not a single Tory?
No.
Would you be friends with a Tory? Sorry, this isn't in there. This is the sort of classic. Would you be friends with a Tory? Forget Tory MPs, normal people.
Politics is something that tells you where people stand on so many different issues. It would be incredibly sticky, let's put it that way.
I mean, I've got friends who are Tories. But the whole thing about like, oh, you should be friends, or not friends, like get on with them and they vote Tory and like we don't really talk about it. But this whole thing of like, you must be friends with people who are literally taking away people's
friends who have
benefits and like, that's crazy. So would you ever be friends with a Tory MP? I shouldn't say, so forget that. Forget that. Best ever Labour MP?
Best ever Labour MP? I mean, in the current PLP?
Ever?
That's really
a tough one, right?
That's really tough. I would say, okay, the easy answer and the one that I naturally default to would be Tony Benn on that. But what was your second question?
Best ever Labour PM, Prime Minister?
I think domestic.
Bit harder, not as many, obviously.
I think domestically, what the Attlee government achieved hasn't been surpassed, and Jeremy would have been the best Labour Prime Minister. So, sad.
Should Alistair Campbell be allowed back in the party?
If he agrees with the democratic principles of the Labour Party, and if he apologises for trying to dogpile me on Twitter. Oh, really?
Good. I think that's a good answer. I actually think he should be allowed back in. I just think he should, for his own benefit, stop saying silly things on Twitter. Perhaps we could all heed that advice, particularly me. AOC or Naomi Klein?
Ooh, okay. So Naomi Klein, because
practice versus theory.
Because she retweeted my maiden speech.
Oh, wow.
And I had met her very briefly at Labour Party conference a couple of years ago in the lift. And I fangirled in the DMs when she retweeted me because I was like, oh my God, I'm a huge fan. So
we interviewed her that year with The World Transformed.
Yeah.
Was it in Brighton?
Yes.
Yeah. Favourite political journalist?
Gary Young.
Favourite writer? Fiction, non-fiction, whatever?
I would say Arundhati Roy.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, politically as well. Her voice is so important.
Tea or coffee?
Hot chocolate. Coffee is, no, not nice.
Not tea? I mean, that's like a cultural thing.
Yeah, so tea, but it's very hard to get my mum's tea when I'm not at home. So my mum's tea is the best tea in the world. Other than that, hot chocolate.
What kind of tea does she make? Like
she makes
chai tea?
Kashmiri tea, but not the pink tea. So it's basically it involves boiling the tea. So you have that layer of cream that you just have to pick off and then dipping it with rusk cake. It's really good. It's very sweet, very sweet. It's diabetes in a cup, really, which is bad.
Most South Asian
but it tastes good.
food and drink, fine. You only live once. South of the Midlands?
Midlands.
Okay, Midlands or London?
Midlands.
Okay. I quite like
London
the Midlands.
is so expensive.
I hate London.
It taxes you for breathing here.
I hate London. No, that's not true. I love London. I do love London. I love many things about London. Let's take some questions. We've got 2 super chats. One's from Benjamin Hulme. Thank you, Ben. Gave us £5. Do you still stand by, I don't know if this is for me or for Zarah. Do you still stand by class war, social democracy? That's actually Michael's thing. Seems a bit counterintuitive since the bourgeois liberal state will consolidate in the interest of capital. It's for another show. That's for another show. But thank you, Ben. How would you define your politics? I guess I can ask that. Social democratic, socialist, democratic socialist?
Socialist. Yes.
And then we've got Vandy Mina giving us $10. Thank you, Vandy. Which position would you like in the shadow cabinet? Straight to the point.
I am not thinking about any shadow cabinet positions. I'm a new MP. And for me, honestly, serving Coventry South in the best way possible is my priority. That's the job that I'm doing.
I mean, you come from social movements, so it's kind of like people think, oh yeah, whatever, but that's kind of like what you've been doing for 10 years.
I come as a community organizer, so for me, it's about rooting myself and making sure that I'm serving the constituents as best as I can. Josh
tweets on the hashtag #TiskiSound. Tweet on the hashtag. How can we improve Labour's anti-racist credentials? It's certainly better than any of the other parties, but that's a low bar. So how can Labour be more of an anti-racist party?
I think if you're an anti-racist, please become a Labour Party member. I think the fight is forever ongoing. You don't get to one point and you're like, we've done it, we've won. And it's really important with people challenging the party and speaking out when they think that the party isn't doing as good a job as it should be. But it requires all of us to get involved in any way, shape and form that we can, especially as members, as MPs, as councillors at all levels.
We've got 1,019 people watching, only 498 likes. Smash the like button if you like what you're watching. We want to do a lot more stuff between now and 2024. Hopefully, we can change British politics in the meantime. And if you think you can help us do that, go to support.novaramedia.com. Help us build a new media for different politics. Nobody's going to do this for us. You were saying just before we came on air that you don't really... The idea of an hour interview is just nobody does this.
Yeah. I don't think media nowadays allows people to really get into detail or talk about things in depth. It's about the buzzwords. It's about the sound bites. What 10-second video can we clip from what you've said? So it's really important that we have these platforms which allow people to really discuss hot political issues that are incredibly important. So support Novara Media and smash that like button.
This is from Aman. What happens if the Labour Party is dragged to the centre-right? I suppose that's a longer-term question. Could be over the next 10, 15 years. Could be the next 10, 15 months. Which is probably the biggest fear for the left in the current leadership election. Credible path to government is one thing. Path to control to the Labour Party is more pressing. That's quite an abstract question, I suppose. I'll start with the beginning of that question. What happens if the Labour Party is dragged to the centre-right?
The fight continues. The party that we have now isn't the party that we had, prior to Jeremy becoming leader, and people were still involved with the party and they were still fighting to get where we got to. So it's about not giving up. It's not about people leaving the party. It's about ensuring that we continue organising and we continue mobilising, but also acknowledging that we need to be involved in our communities, in our workplaces, in our, campuses and things like that, because we need an active social base. We need to keep fighting outside. So when, it's about bottom up grassroots power, and then coupled with, a leadership at some point, with Rebecca as leader to carry on what Jeremy was doing with that top-down support.
Prosper Unga Hamilton. That's an interesting name. How do you think, maybe it is your name, sorry, Prosper. How do you think countercultural news organisations like Novara Media and the Young Turks will change, respond, if they become the media establishment at some point in the future? I suppose, is that a question for me, Prosper?
That's for you.
That's not going to happen. Sadly, I'd love us to be a multi-billion-dollar multinational, but I wouldn't. Calm down.
As long as you pay your taxes.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. I think I'll be very quick because we're here to talk about you. What's worrying for me is that we saw in the last election what a media controlled by the right can do. The thing is, by 2024, it could get a lot worse. You could have a collapse of the newspapers. We've already seen glimpses of it. Effectively, just propaganda through Facebook, adverts, fake WhatsApp. Sort of, Jeremy Corbyn tweeted this. He didn't really.
Yeah.
The far right use this stuff. It's called dark social. You can just basically, deep fakes. Somebody saying something they didn't really say. By 2024, that's going to be the terrain we're on. I'm really worried that the left isn't really ready for that. That's why we make stuff with Novara Media. Sorry, you wanted to.
No, as well as the attacks on press freedom, we've seen what the Tories are going to probably do to the courts, and it's frightening because this isn't a normal Conservative government.
No.
So we're heading towards
with Assange and
exactly,
which we have a documentary out on very soon. Matt C1 UK asks, what's happening with community organising in Coventry? And do you see community organising continuing in the future Labour Party? There was a petition which was sent around in the last few days supporting it. What's your view? I
really hope so. For me, community organising is how we build power. It's about how, while we're not in government, we're saving libraries from closing, how we stop, local GP surgeries from closing, how in London there have been amazing campaigns against rogue landlords. While we don't have a community organising in Coventry, for me, community organising is very much something I'm incredibly passionate about, and it's going to be the way that we organise in Coventry while I am also the MP at the same time. And I really hope that the Labour Party doesn't scrap community organising. It's the future. It's the way that we will win back places that we've recently lost, but also the places that we've lost over the past 10 years, where people feel like politics isn't for them, or, they feel hopeless and that things are just going to get worse. It's through building those links and those relationships and that power collectively that we can stop, the worst parts of austerity harming us.
We've got a question again from Benjamin Hulme. I think we'll probably call it there. Maybe take one more question after this. Thanks again for the super chat, Benjamin. Zarah, do you think Labour are doing enough on Palestine Arab solidarity? On the Middle East, obviously Labour was responsible for, we've just seen it with pulling out of Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Obviously responsible for some really bad foreign policy decisions. What do you think Labour members, parliamentarians can do to put some of that right?
I don't think we can ever say we've done enough when it comes to internationalism, whether it's in the Middle East or, Africa or the Indian subcontinent, especially places where we've got a colonial legacy, and that we've been complicit in the underdevelopment of countries and regions. Even today, with the climate crisis, you look at the places, across Africa, you look at the fact that Bangladesh will be one of the first countries to go underwater. These are all places that the UK has either through colonialism or through exploitation played a part in. And I think that the Labour Party always needs to centre the struggles of Indigenous people, of the global South in its politics. And foreign policy is incredibly important because we still, sit in very powerful positions in the UN and other places, and we need to make sure that we are not complicit in the oppression of people, whether they're in the Middle East or, currently when we look at what's happening in India. I think it's really important that the UK, whether it's the Labour Party, especially the Labour Party, given our values of internationalism, speaks up. So I would say that we will never be at a place, hopefully we will be at a place where we can say, we're great at it, but it's something that's an ongoing fight that we have to always fight for.
Jay asks, will Priti Patel be forced to resign?
This government, right? Like Sajid Javid stepped down and because he felt like, he felt insulted, essentially, being told how to do his job. But Priti Patel was demoted after we found out about her extracurricular activities on holiday, only to be promoted again. And I don't think this government really...
She resigned. Was that not a resignation? Or I think it was, no?
We followed that flight. I think everyone on Twitter followed that flight when it happened. But then she's in another senior position. So I don't think this is a government that really abides by the rules that we are accustomed to. So I don't think we can really hope for things like that. But it's also important not to get distracted by, these incidents in Parliament, but look at what they're doing in terms of the policies that they're pushing forward. The budget's coming out in a couple of days, next week on the 11th of March. So it's important to not get distracted by other things that they're trying to confuse us with.
Final question from William Robinson asks, as a non-Labour member who is now too late to join to vote for Rebecca Long-Bailey.
Still join.
So that's the first point. Okay, well, yeah. What can I do to forward the left in the party?
Join. You might not have voting rights for this this leadership election, but you're able to get involved with your CLP. You're able to go to meetings and really build exciting campaigns and be part of the movement. So it's important to get involved in all shapes and ways and forms, and also start running for positions. And if you're really passionate about, becoming a councillor, becoming an MP, find out how you can do that. And because it's really important that we also ensure that our councillors, as well as our MPs and also the Labour Party staff. So, if there's a job vacancy at the Labour Party, go for it. All of these things are really important for us to get involved with.
Yeah, we need good councillors in this country.
Local government is the bread and butter of politics.
Very important. Yeah, we've got local elections in May.
And the mayoral elections as well. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Been great to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
You're watching Tisky Sour. If you like what you watch, go to support.novaramedia.com. We can have Zarah on whenever you want to come on. But we'd also love this show to be nightly. We will see you. Am I on the middle camera? Is that right, folks? We will see you, I believe, on Wednesday. Michael is back. He's presently in Yorkshire. I think he's at the beach. Who goes to the beach in Yorkshire in the winter? But there you go. He'll be back on Wednesday with a show. I'll be back on Friday. Robin Powell, thank you for the £20 super chat. And that's not even a question. He's just said, could you please try and persuade Jeremy Corbyn to continue as leader for as long as possible? That's to you, I suppose. Thank you. See you Wednesday. Good night.